Talk to me about this leaking. Of course, before that, we heard about Israel. I mean, how big a problem is this?
On the leaking issue, Mike, it's a serious problem. I mean, from a personal perspective, I think it's absolutely outrageous for government officials who possess classified information to be leaking information with near impunity, as they have for years, maybe decades in this city. I won't speak for foreign capitals and what happens in London and elsewhere in Europe, but it's a very dangerous situation, and there's really no meaningful reason for this information to have been leaked other than to give the New York Times some type of information as a scoop ahead of other newspapers. So was this done to curry favor with journalists in order to be able to gain political capital, to pursue a political or partisan agenda down the road? I don't know. But the bottom line is it's outrageous, it's unacceptable, and it ought to be punished.
Yeah, and leaking is not anything new here in Washington, but this administration it seems like it's leaking like a sieve. But overall, the press has not been all that great about the NATO meeting. One headline online said President Trump throws his weight around at the NATO summit. They show him kind of shoving the Montenegro prime minister away. Then the handshake. We've seen so much of this kind of sawing handshake. Talk to me about that, your overall assessment, and of course his rhetoric as well, kind of heavy-handed, some NATO members might suggest.
The president made the NATO relationship one of the mainstays of his campaign rhetoric in 2015 and 2016. He didn't go to NATO to become, business as usual type president or leader. He went to disrupt, and he's been keeping the European allies a little bit off kilter, and I think that was part of his strategy here as well, Mike. One, first of all, it's a transactional relationship to a certain degree. He's made very clear he expects his partners to keep their part of the bargain, and that's that floor of 2% of GDP must go to defense spending. So that's going to be a bottom line issue for him, and I think it's one of the reasons why he didn't emphasize the Article 5 issue that so worried so many analysts and so many political leaders in Europe for that matter. But I think also there's a difference of opinion as to what the threats to NATO are. There are those countries in the north and east of NATO who believe it's coming from Russia. But I think Trump is more concerned, as are leaders in southern and western Europe, about the threats from the Middle East and northern Africa in terms of migration, in terms of radical terrorism and the like. And so I think the Europeans themselves aren't quite clear as to what their NATO defense strategy is going to be going forward. But Trump didn't go there just to reassure everyone. He went there to communicate a message. He disrupted all of the niceties. And I don't think he really cares all that much about the U.S. press on NATO. I think he cares about the results coming out of this.
Yeah, disruptive, it seems to be his mantra in many respects. You wrote in an op-ed piece in the Washington Times back in January, the global risks Mr. Trump inherits are generating sheer disorder in the world's most important regions. The task before the new president to craft a geopolitical strategy is great. Are we seeing it emerge?
I haven't seen it yet. And I think part of the problem is here in Washington, we like to remind everyone that personnel is policy, and they simply don't have the right people in place in many of the key departments, Mike. So DOD is fairly well staffed in the upper echelons, but we're reading the reports about Secretary of State Tillerson, who walks around on the 7th floor of the State Department, and there's a literal echo chamber there because so many of the main assistant secretary type positions are unfilled. And the NSC, the reports I think about a week ago were that 60%, 60, of the NSC staff are Obama holdovers. So he doesn't really have his own national security team in place to begin with, and then trying to work through these types of international visits. And I think going to Saudi Arabia as his first international trip sent a very strong message to voters back here at home that he really does intend to put together a coalition to defeat and destroy Islamic State and to shore up Sunni Islamic support for that coalition against ISIS.